So patreon.com/left reckoning. We also got into David Pakman, who called pretty loudly for accountability on Rashida Tlaib. I wonder if, and he's been quiet since the stuff that he says was abundantly clear that it was a Hamas rocket. I don't think that was ever true, that you could say that. But he wanted accountability for people who are saying things that now look exceedingly plausible and where's the burden of proof. So we talked about that and got a little bit heated. So patreon.com/left reckoning if you want to hear that.
Do we have Brandon and Binder, or just there he is? We have Binder. What's up?
Hello.
Binder? How you doing?
Doing good. How are you guys?
I heard
that Matt Leck's over there beefing with David Pakman. Welcome to the club.
Oh, you are too?
I mean, my beef with Pakman goes years ago. He emailed me with a very stern email a while back after I said something on an episode of this show.
About what?
About
Topic.
Michael Brooks.
Yeah.
Yeah. He didn't like my telling of his, when I was on the episode where we were remembering Michael, he didn't like my telling my own personal feelings of how things went down when I first met Michael. He said he was very hurt by it because I said how, when I first met Michael, I was, cautious about him because he came from a more, democratic centrist sort of, like a Democrat centrist show. And then over the years, it became quite clear that he fit here at the Majority Report and not over at that show, just based on his politics.
I mean,
that was just my own personal. I didn't mean I didn't mean any hatred towards David. That was just my own personal retelling of events. And he sent me a email that day because, of course, that was the important thing at the time, not anything else. How he was very angry with me, and he was very hurt by it. And because I was in a nice mood, because, wanting to not hurt anybody's feelings at the time, for sure, I apologized for it and said I didn't mean anything by it. And then he let me know that he did not accept my apology, which to me was incredible. Incredible.
How long had Michael been?
It was
for a little bit early on.
Dead at that point?
Not even days. That was literally what I said was on the episode for his memorial.
I did not know this. And that is not great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe, yeah. I mean, I think it is. I mean, we can all be relieved that Michael fit better here at a place where we don't sort of run cover for Bolivia coup or what's going on in Gaza.
I mean, I knew there was nothing wrong with what I said because I didn't even mean anything by it at the time.
That's just uncontroversially true.
Right. But after seeing Pakman's takes recently, not only is it my opinion, but it is extremely clear that is fact. I mean, Michael has the exact opposite take on Pakman on this topic. And this topic was so near and dear and important to Michael that if he had never come to the Majority Report and was working with David Pakman this whole time, he would have undoubtedly left the program over this specific topic. No doubt about it.
I mean, yeah, and I mean, to just summarize, our problem is I find it really annoying that Pakman keeps putting, like he was with Steve Schmidt or whatever, and putting all of these critiques, like Israel's an apartheid state, into the mouth of like some sort of imaginary campus activist that is too enthusiastic and doesn't know the world, when actually it's Amnesty International and Ilham Papi.
It's the United
and
Nations.
Rashid Khalidi. Like, interact with adults that are talking about this instead of just running around and saying, oh, if you say apartheid, you don't know what words mean.
It's Jewish Voice for Peace. It's if not now. I mean,
and I think he's been somewhat avoidant on the issue, but time's up on that.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing that with us, Matt, because that is a story that
I didn't know that.
I did not know, and I think is notable and very, very uncool. So
I mean, people could just go back and watch the episode. I said it as sort of like a humorous sort of thing to lighten the mood on a very sad day. It was very clear I didn't mean anything by it to Pakman. It was just like, Michael fit here. This is where he was, and it fit into me and Michael constantly joking about Pakman's show that when we were together at the Majority Report. So I mean, but and I even apologized because I didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings over it. And if he was hurt over it, then that was not my take. But then when he decided to make it clear to me that he did not accept it, I mean, he didn't have to accept it, but takes that extra step to email me to let me know he did not accept it. Then that became clear to me that I don't care for Pac-Man, and I don't care that I hurt his feelings.
Beef is fine. There's no light without heat, and let's just let it be that way, and we can keep it on the issues, which I think, Binder, you're right about. Like he just very clearly is more of a centrist now. You're going on being lachrymose with Steve Schmidt instead of talking to adults. Like have Barnaby Rain on. You want to talk about anti-Semitism? Give your audience something as opposed to impoverishing them with this sort of thing. It's guru-like, honestly. It's like the inability to deal, and Brian Butler's the same thing. Sorry to get off on a tangent while we're trying to do plugs, but Brian Butler writing this piece, Biden doesn't support genocide. You click on it expecting some sort of definition of genocide or some contention with experts who are calling it genocide. And no, it's just Israel. Biden doesn't support genocide because Israel isn't doing a genocide, you accelerationists. People need to get fucking serious. Hey, Brandon.
Brandon,
I want to say, no, thank you for having me. I want to say I'm instinctually on Matt Bender and Matt Lecht's side of this argument, even though I only caught the last little bit.
I mean, well, I don't understand how we're quibbling with genocide at this point. The only reason that we are not in the place of genocide right at this very moment is because like Biden is half-heartedly trying to stall the situation of a ground invasion, but Netanyahu and the Israeli government put their tanks over the border in northern Gaza and be like, hey, it's coming, don't you worry. And it's now 7,000 dead, almost 3,000 children dead, and we're talking in the span of less than 3 weeks. So at this rate, what are we talking about here?
Well, I mean, yeah, obviously you have all that evidence that a genocide is happening, but have you seen Israel tweeting that Voldemort would be on their side?
Yeah, I did see that.
And Jigsaw. I mean, it came from an AI thing, but people are saying like it is ethnic cleansing, not genocide. Go take it up with the genocide expert in Jewish currents. People just feel the need to just say things. And also like this sort of thing, this sort of abstract argument over terminology. It's more easy to say this or that than say like, oh yeah, actually I think killing 7,000 people, 3,000 kids, that's good. Whether you call it genocide, whether you want to call it ethnic cleansing, like
well, Netanyahu's saying we're the children of light and they're the children of darkness. Exactly. I mean, this is the most fascist stuff that we could possibly hear. Anyway, Sam's OnlyFans says, hi, Emma and MR crew. Israel is a coward and a terrorist state, plain and simple. Anyone still doubting that in Gaza, I invite them to listen to how Israeli officials threaten to bomb Lebanon into the, quote, Stone Age if Hezbollah opens up a new front. They explicitly say that they will bomb Beirut, which is the capital and most dense area in Lebanon, although it is well known that Hezbollah's strongholds are in the mountainous regions in southern Lebanon near the borders with Israel. Yeah.
We need to be clear about this sort of new stage that we've reached in this the bloodbath, which is that yesterday Anthony Blinken told Al Jazeera, it was reported that Anthony Blinken told Al Jazeera to tone it down. The same day, and at least one Al Jazeera reporter had his family, where the place that his family was taking refuge, targeted and bombed. And he says they are targeting our families. Even I've seen an Israeli minister say that we generally know who's getting hit. For instance, we hit an Al Jazeera person's family yesterday. Now, maybe this is all fog of war, and it doesn't, and Israel isn't targeting the places where journalists' families are staying to bomb them. But that's not the only journalist whose family got hit yesterday, and I think it's despicable and it's blood curdling, and it is really hard not to be super tense when you look at things like that. Yep.
State Line Rocco. Matt made a great point. A lot of these YouTube guys act like gurus instead of journalists. Yeah.
It's cowardice. Like have Pappy on. I'm sure he would do it, David. Have Barnaby Rain on. Have somebody on who is going to challenge these things as opposed to shadow boxing with these strawman college campus activists that are so overly enthusiastic and so unprincipled. Like have some courage to deal with people who are actually calling this an apartheid state. Because like you look at his coverage of BDS and it's always this, you guys just don't understand it. You don't understand it. I would love to support BDS, but it's just not worked yet. You know what? When the South Africa boycott started, the fucking 50s.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of what you're seeing also right now is like the flailing of and desperation, because I mean,
right? Because he wouldn't jump in.
Poll after poll is showing that the tide is turning here. That people are realizing that it isn't what's being portrayed on mainstream media, and on top of that, not only isn't it being portrayed, it's not too complicated for you to have an opinion on.
Yep.
You can see the deaths of children. You can see the deaths of innocent people and call it out. And no, that's wrong. There's no sort of additional information that you need that complicates the deaths of innocent people.
Now that we're on this topic, let's do a clip on it, I feel like, because we can just kind of bring our conversation into the context of others, statements here. I think this is number 2 here, Bradley. Gillerman, yeah. Here is Sky News' Mark Austin and former Israeli representative to the United Nations, Dan Gillerman. And Sky News is asking Gillerman about the blockade in Gaza. And just notice here the language that is used when he is speaking about Palestinians. He doesn't say Hamas here. He's talking broadly about the Palestinian people. And I think it's revelatory, and it indicates what we're really dealing with here.
I just want to ask you then about something else he said in his speech, which is about the collective punishment, as he put it, of the Palestinian people. And I want to talk about that in the context of the blockade and keeping fuel out of Gaza. I just wonder if you think that that is really necessary.
I'm very puzzled by the constant concern which the world and also Britain, I must say, Mark, is showing for the Palestinian people, and is actually showing for these horrible, inhuman animals who have done the worst atrocities that this century has seen.
Can you pause it?
The worst atrocities.
We need to go back. We're going back. We need to emphasize this. First of all, let's be clear here. The UK and the United States and the West is in some way sympathetic with the Palestinians right now. Are we joking? There were only 10 members of Congress in the United States who voted against the first bill that this new speaker brought up, which was about unequivocal support for Israel. They are voices that are marginalized, and then also almost formally so in efforts to censure people like Ilhan Omar for previously speaking out about the disproportionate bias that Israel receives in terms of both funding and media coverage in the West. But the truth is starting to get out, and they're anxious about that. But we have to go back. He's concerned.
I will say he's probably more so focused on the public opinion, and I will say the public opinion has clearly even had an effect on even mainstream media. We are seeing questions about the safety and care of what's going to happen to the innocent Palestinian civilians that we would have never seen in prior years.
They are losing control of the narrative.
Right.
We're also in a post Iraq War was bad era. Like, a lot of this stuff is just not made for an era where people have generally agreed that the Iraq War, that the imperialism that the United States engages in, and by people, I mean, people online and public opinion, but, the under 35s in the world grew up in a world where, like, we acknowledge that the Iraq War was bad, and not in the wishy-washy, but support our troops, but don't support the war way, where it's like, no, Iraq war was bad. There is mixed opinion on the Afghanistan invasion, but certainly it's not looked upon favorably now. And they just want to go back to a world where you can unequivocally oppress Muslims and Arab minorities and have everyone cheer you on and have no pushback for it.
And the thing is also that Palestinians have smartphones now. We're in an era where people can film exactly what's going on, and the Israeli government's efforts to control the narrative are successful in the sense that their electricity and fuel blockade has severely cut into the ability of Palestinians to share their stories and get footage out there, but it's not enough, and that's what he's freaking out about. And again, pay attention. He does not say Hamas here. He says the Palestinians.
You know, I'm very puzzled by the constant concern which the world and also Britain, I must say, Mark, is showing for the Palestinian people, and is actually showing for these horrible, inhuman animals who have done the worst atrocities that this century has seen, and the worst atrocities that Jews have suffered since the Holocaust. I mean, you know, when the United States reacted to 9/11, I don't remember people shedding tears for the Taliban or Al-Qaeda. Your country, Mark, actually, Britain, actually joined them and even sent your royals to fight in Afghanistan. When the Ukrainians reacted to Russia's invasion, I don't remember people worrying about the poor Russian soldiers and whether they had enough food. All of a sudden, when it comes to Israel, everybody is becoming a great humanitarian, totally forgetting what happened 2.5 weeks ago, which is unforgettable and unforgiven.
I mean,
the argument is basically,
this is not only conflation. This is not only conflating, Palestinian people with all sorts of dehumanizing language, but he also conflates them, the entire Palestinian people, with terrorist groups like Al Qaeda. And then he goes on to compare them to the Russian military. There was lots of concern. There was a whole anti-war movement that was concerned about innocent lives in Iraq and Afghanistan post 9/11. There were a lot of people who were even against the dehumanizing language of even the people that supposedly we were after. Because, people can do terrible things. You don't need to call them animals and dehumanize. Like, people are totally capable of doing bad things. But like, it's just like the conflation of everything in an attempt to try to bring it back around to they're losing. They're just like flailing here.
Brandon, I know you wanted to say something. I'm going to give.
I was just going to say, it just seems like his argument is that like the West got to commit atrocities before. How come they're going to stop us now?
Yep.
Like where was all the humanitarian? And I spoke on this before. It existed, but there wasn't so many smartphones. There weren't so many Twitter accounts. And it seems a little entitled to want to commit like genocide in apartheid states, but not want anyone to comment negatively online. But that's the era of fascism, and that's the era of imperialism that we live in, where not only is it enough that these people have to be fully in control of, countries, like fascists have to be in control of Israel and in control of the United States of America. They also need you to support them in their goals, even if all the war protesters, millions of people can be on the street, not going to affect whether or not anybody, I'm not going to affect whether or not we fund Israel, not going to affect whether or not they bomb Palestinians, but they still want the moral victory as well.
Yeah, and let's be precise.
And like they're so outraged too about like the focus not being on what happened on October 7th, but like that's on them too. Like that's their fault too. Like, you've used it to kill.
Yeah.
Right. I'm actually worried about the hostages. Like a lot of people are. Those are innocent people. A lot of them actually we're finding out as time goes on are actually quite sympathetic to what's going on in Gaza to begin with, even before all this. And you're hearing from their families, their poor families saying, telling their own government to care about my family member who's a hostage over there. And it's quite clear that the Israeli government does not care about those hostages, at least not as the priority.
No, they're bombing where they are.
They want the
Right.
hostages to be added to the death count total so they can continue to serve as propaganda.
Yes,
If
and
the-
then
if
they'll
Israel
eventually
was
say
not-
Hamas.
if
It's
Israel-
Hamas's fault, right?
Right. If Israel was not bombing Gaza right now, the entirety of the media apparatus, public opinion would be talking about freeing those hostages, doing
Absolutely.
something about those hostages. But instead, people are focused on what's going on to innocent Palestinian men, women, and children who have nothing to do with this,
Yes.
because that's ongoing. That's ongoing. Like
Yeah.
the hostages have been taken. The only
That's
thing
the
that can
thing,
happen
yeah.
now. The only thing that can happen now is the governments do something to free them, but the hostages have been taken.
That's
Right.
exactly it, and it's the backwards facing. The consistent effort to only look backward is a way for people to commit atrocities behind people's back. If people are looking backwards in the past, they're not able to see what's happening behind them, which is the nearly 7,000 civilian, or I mean, this is going to be an undercount, but 7,000 dead Palestinian civilians, 3,000 of them children, over 60% of them are women and children. Don't look at that. Look away, and don't have sympathy. They're all terrorists. They should all be dehumanized. And just think about this for a second. Like, if the United States was funding a Muslim extremist organization, which is, you can call the Israeli government, well, I mean, a Muslim extremist formal government, let's say, in the vein of the Israeli government, and they were bombing a 141 square mile strip of land with 2.4 million people in it, and it was more bombs dropped in that small area than we did in the first year of our invasion of Afghanistan, and civilians were getting killed over and over and over again. You think that everybody wouldn't be outraged as well? Like, this is not about the tribal nature that these really like fascist sociopaths are trying to make it out to be. This is just about basic humanity. That's it.
I was going to say, that does kind of almost describe our relationship with Saudi Arabia. But, again, that just goes part of this larger tapestry of human rights violations that the American government funds at home and abroad, that, they want to decontextualize this particular incident of Israeli aggression on the Palestinian people, because that also fits within a larger timeline of them doing that as well, which is another reason why it's easier to put that within the context. I mean, to put this particular genocidal ambition into the context of that larger history of them oppressing the Palestinian people than it is to act like it's a reasonable response to a terrorist attack.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's just amazing to me that people can't contextualize that there is an entire difference between what the Hamas attack and the ongoing assault in Gaza from the perspective of an American commentator. What'd you say?
And the West Bank too.
And the West Bank, yeah. Well, we should add that too, because that's happening there too, where Hamas is not the ruling power. But it doesn't matter if they're Palestinians.
Like, even so, like the idea, I've seen this thing like, oh, why aren't people protesting against Hamas? What control do U.S. activists here have over Hamas? Nothing.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing people don't seem to get. It's not that people are just out in the streets just voicing their outrage. No, they're focused on what's going on in Gaza and what's the bombing of Gaza. Because guess what? The U.S. is the government is backing what Israel's doing, and political opinion here matters. So U.S. activists can actually do something to affect the lives
of
the people who are on the line in Gaza, the innocent Palestinian people. The U.S. activists here have zero power over freeing the hostages from Hamas. Zero.
Yeah.
Oh, they can shout all they
want.
Or the
Hamas attack before.
Yeah.
Or the Hamas attack before that happened, and it was not anticipated, right? And those deaths were horrific and tragic, and the hostage taking horrific and tragic. But it's about what we can control. And what we can control is limiting the massacre that's happening in Gaza. And there are seemingly no signs of the massacre slowing down. So that's why people are freaking out and outraged and sick to their stomachs. It's not difficult to comprehend.
Everything in this conflict always goes back to power. Who's able to do something right now? Who's able to control what happens to everybody, really? And every single time that lands on the world powers, Israel, the United States government, the entire West, there's nothing that people who have zero power, even us, can do to convince anything on the other side otherwise in terms of what's going on, Hamas or other organizations. Because, well, first of all, they don't even hold the power in the scenario to end the bombings in Gaza, but we have no power to them. What we do have is power to show the U.S. government that the vast majority of people don't approve. You could see it in the Biden approval ratings that literally just came out about an hour before we went live. Biden in a month lost 11 points with Democrats, down 11 points with Democrats. The analyses I've seen are all saying it has to do with what's going on in Israel. It's very clear that people in the United States, especially people in Biden's party, the base, are not happy with what's going on. And that's why you're seeing protests out in the streets, because that's the one thing we can control. That's the one thing we have some sort of power to do. And that's to show our government that we do not approve of what's going on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead.
Chantel Brown, still a member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus who beat Nina Turner with a large amount of AIPAC money, was one of these people who co-sponsored the resolution, which is condemning the terrorism of Hamas and which sends a message to the world: we stand with Israel. That's why they invested in her instead of all the other folks who are saying, I do condemn attacks on civilians, including the ones that Israel is doing in lieu of going after and trying to secure the freedom of those hostages, because again, they don't want those hostages freed. They're serving their purpose for them just fine right now. And anybody who wants to continue to support Israel's bombing of Gaza because of what happened on the 7th, they are telling you that rather than those people being brought home safely, they want to send a message about terrorism. That's what they are saying to you.
It's also just, rank racism too. It's rank racism and Islamophobia, because ultimately the Israeli government is telling you that they don't believe in civilians. They don't believe that civilians exist in the context of Palestinians. Civilians only are allowed to exist in the context of Western powers. If you vote for a country or a government, or even if you don't vote for a country or government that is consistently involved in imperialist or genocidal violence, that doesn't implicate you in any way, politically, morally, intellectually. But if you happen to share the same skin tone as people and live in the same general vicinity as people who commit violence against any group, you're able to be painted with that broad brush. And we see that across the globe. We see that, the idea of civilians is something that we deny, and we have denied to Arabs in the Middle East just by nature of the war on terror. We know Obama's drone policy was that if you're just hanging out in Iraq or Afghanistan and you could be a terrorist, then we will just call you that, and we won't acknowledge that you're a casualty or a civilian in any sense of the way, because it looks bad for us. And so, it's just something that as a country we have yet to reckon with, because we are in many ways held hostage by our two-party system, that there is still a, moral weight to supporting Joe Biden if you happen to have voted for him. I did not vote for Joe Biden. I know, I just want to put that out there. But if you did, and even though I didn't, I still feel a sort of moral weight for being an American who exists within a paradigm that is the biggest exponent of violence in the world. And, I think that in the West, we do a very good job of propagandizing ourselves, that that's something that we can all wash our hands of. And so I applaud the people who are out there protesting, because they feel a passion that a lot of people are very willing to just go like, that's unreasonable. Just because I voted for the guy doesn't mean I support everything he does. There's a lot of excuses about how you're not part of this problem. In fact, that you're completely divorced from the American or Israeli government in a way that we just don't allow other people in countries that we're oppressing to be.
Yeah, and I want to shout out, there's a piece in Teen Vogue. Everyone should share it because I think it's like the only place that covered this, but by Lexi McMenamin. College students at more than 100 campuses across the country plan to walk out today and to protest for a ceasefire in Gaza and for their universities to sever their close ties to arms manufacturers providing Israel with its weapons like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and Raytheon. National walkout was organized by a broad coalition of groups, including the Palestinian Youth Movement, the anti-war organization Dissenters. And I'll just say, like, list these groups. God bless all these kids who are standing up in a way that I think is extremely inspiring. I was a college kid during Occupy, so there was like some activism, but I feel like it's even more mature now than it was when I was a college kid. And shame, absolute shame on anybody calling these kids participating in this anti-Semitic. Like, I don't know how, like, one, you're playing a dangerous game with the concept of anti-Semitism, but two, you are smearing like some of the best our country has to offer.
A lot of time they're smearing young Jews too as anti-Semitic. I mean, honestly, some of the most prominent and loudest voices in this have been young Jewish people, and it amazes me that people attack them when that's the most brave stance they could possibly take, and it's the right stance. And I really respect those people, really do.